All right, so in 1.9, a lot of what we're doing, the major part is going to be with circles. You should have a pretty good grasp as far as distance formula and midpoint formula, but realistically, the distance formula is the same thing in circles, it just looks different. Okay? It's really the same formula that you have as a circle formula, but at the same time, it's a little bit different because it's like we've already taken one step into it. Remember that whenever we have a distance formula between 2 points of a line, or we're trying to find what it is, you could even use it as it's really just a right triangle, okay, in Pythagorean theorem, where it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's the same idea. So distance formula, circle formula whenever we get to it, and Pythagorean theorem are really all the same formula. It's just kind of in a different state, okay, or in a different, it has a different look to it. But realistically, nothing changes, okay? It's still taking 2 points. We're going to subtract the x values and square it, and then add whatever our y values are whenever they're subtracted, and those are squared, okay? So it's one of those things that you've done it before. There's really not a whole lot that's new. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on the distance and the midpoint side of things as we are with the circle side of things. So if you have the distance between -1 and -3, or -1, -3, and 2, 3, basically all I'm going to do is just start with everything underneath the radical, and whenever I do, figure out which one you want to make x1 and which one you want to make x2. Okay, again, it does not matter to me. I usually just go in order of whatever I have. So I'm going to go -1 minus 2, square it, plus -3 minus 3, and square that. So -1 and -2 combined is just going to be -3 squared plus -6 squared. Now, one thing you've got to make sure is you should not get a negative answer underneath the radical because you can't have a negative distance. Okay? Everything here is going to be positive. So -3 squared is just going to be a positive 9. So I'm going to have the square root of 9 plus 36. So the square root of 45. Now, if it tells you to put it in simplified radical form, do that. If it tells you to round to two decimal places, do that as well. In this case, it tells us to do both things, so we're going to do both things. So whenever we do that, remember 45 simplified radical form just means that we can go the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. So anytime I ask for the exact answer, then this is what I'm looking for. Okay? If I'm looking for the exact answer, I'm going to have 3 times the square root of 5. Okay? The exact answer, and whenever you see it on an ACT or whatever, any sort of standardized test or my test, and it asks for an exact answer, it wants it in simplified radical form. Okay? I don't like dealing with decimals, to be perfectly honest with you, just for the fact that if I have to deal with decimals, I'll have multiple people round it multiple different ways, even though you've been taught how to round it in elementary school and in junior high, and I'll have questions. Well, it says 2 decimal places, but this second one is a 0. Well, it's a 0 then. That's okay. So 3 times the square root of 5, I do not have off the top of my head. Anybody want to? Is that rounded 2 places? So it's approximately 6.71. Then the second part just deals with the midpoint formula. We have 2 coordinates on coordinate plane. We have a line between them. We want to know where the middle is, or where that middle point is. Opposite side of this is I'm going to take the 2 x values, I'm going to add them, I'm going to divide by 2. I'm going to take the 2 y values, I'm going to add them, I'm going to divide by 2, and that's going to give me my coordinate. Okay, it'll give me my coordinate of my x value, or the middle part between the two. So if I have 1, 2, and 7, 3, all I'm going to do, now for me, I'm going to find the midpoint of x first, and I'm just going to plug it in, or kind of put it together all at once. So in that case, I'm going to take 1, I'm going to take 1 plus 7 divided by 2. And then I'm going to take 2 minus 3, or plus a negative 3, however you want to look at it, and divide it by 2. So 1 plus 7 is 8, so I have 8 over 2. So the midpoint of x, so if we call this x sub m, whatever you want to call it, and then if we call this y sub m, I'm going to have negative 1 over 2, so negative 1/2. So as far as my midpoint is concerned of this segment, it will just be 4 and then negative 1/2. So the main part of 1-9, or this part, is a circle. Okay, because everything else that we'll do the rest of the week, or the rest of the time while we're in the second half of chapter 1, is dealing with functions. Okay, where the problem is here, a circle is not a function. Even though we can still have a formula for it, it doesn't have a function because, one, it doesn't pass vertical line test, because we have 2 points at some point stacked on top of each other for various x values. Okay, whatever they are, positive or negative. So in that term, okay, that's why we're kind of putting it off by itself. Standard form of the equation of a circle is just that. It's x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equal to r squared. Now, I told you earlier that that the distance formula and that the circle formula is very similar. So why is it similar? Well, if I would actually take this and take the square root of both sides, doesn't this look eerily familiar to the distance formula? The only thing that's different here, okay, the only thing different between the standard equation of a circle and the distance formula is obviously, one, the values that you have, or the letters or the variables that we're using. Okay? But other than that, it's the same thing. It's still two values, two x values, that are getting subtracted and then squared, added with two y values that are getting subtracted and then squared. Okay? So standard form of an equation of a circle is just like the older brother or younger sister, however you want to look at it, of the distance formula. They are related. Okay? It's just a matter of looking a little bit different. Okay? Whereas with the equation of a standard circle, what you should have seen a lot of times is an H last year in Algebra 2 and a K. Okay? Where the center is H and K. Okay? So in that term, if it's a minus, it's going to be your opposite value. Okay? So if it would be like a plus, it would actually be a negative value for your H or your K. Right? Whereas whenever we dealt with things with functions, usually the way that I always told students was that H is always the opposite and K is what it is. Whereas here, K is just like H, and it's going to be the opposite as far as where the center of my circle is. Okay? H and K always deal with the center of the circle. R, obviously, like it says, is the radius. So on 3, it says, write the standard form of an equation of a circle with a center at 0, 0, and a radius of 4. So is there anything that I need to do with x minus 0 and y minus 0? Like, can I do anything with that? No. So all it's going to do is it's just going to look as simple as x squared plus y squared Now, it says the radius is 4, so what do I need to do? If the radius is 4, what is everything actually equal to? If r is equal to 4, yeah. Okay, this is probably the one thing that if there's going to be a mistake, that's where it's going to get made, because students are just going to say, oh, 4, boom, put it down there. No, you have to square it. Okay, you have to square it. If you are given the radius, you have to square it before you put it on the back side of the equation. Okay. Whereas then with 4, same thing, standard equation, your center is at 0, -6. So if we're going to put this in, if I'm going to have x minus h, what's h? H is just 0, right? So if I have x minus 0 squared plus, now it's -6, so it's going to be y minus -6 squared equal to my radius squared. So what's my radius squared? 100, right? Now let's clean everything else up, okay, as far as having multiple signs and things like that. So x minus 0 is just going to be x, so it's going to be x squared plus, I'm still going to leave it in a parenthesis. I'm not going to change anything. The two negatives are going to be a positive, and I'm going to have y plus 6 quantity squared equal to 100. It's okay to have one of them that is in a parenthesis and one of them that's not. That's going to happen. That's going to be completely all right. So then here it says find the center and the radius of a circle whose equation is x plus 3 squared plus y minus 1 squared equal to 4. And then we want to graph it. So the first thing, so we've got to do a couple things. First one, we've got to find the center, and then we have to find the radius. So if we have the center, remember the center is just h and k. Okay? If you're not sure about what it is or what the problem, it's going to be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equal to our radius squared. And then we need our radius. So if it's a 3 in here, it's a positive 3 in there, what is our actual h value? It's the opposite, right? So what's the opposite of positive 3? Negative 3. So negative 3. If it's the opposite of negative 1, what's the opposite of negative 1? Positive 1. So there's my center. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go from there, and I'm going to put a point at negative 3, positive 1, and here's my center. Now, if it's all equal to 4, what's my radius? What's the square root of 4? 2. So, the easy part, as far as graphing it, okay, and I'll be the first to tell you, the first few circles that you make are going to be a little rough. Okay, it's going to look like a football or a really deflated basketball. So if my radius is 2, basically all I'm going to do is go 2 points in each direction and make sure from there, okay, those are all points on my circle. Does that make sense? Because it's 2, the distance is 2 all the way around. So from there, you get a fancy little tool like that, and you draw the circle, okay? You guys need one of those. Is use the graph to identify the relations, domain, and the range. So basically, what does the domain go from? So what's my interval of my x values? So basically from here to here, what are my x values? from -5 to -1. Now, everything's included, so we want to make sure we put the bracket around it. And then do the same thing for the range, but now go from the bottom to the top. So my range is going to go from -1 to a +5. Right? +3, I'm sorry. So whenever we have a general form, basically that just means we have x squared plus y squared, and then an x value and a y value, and then a constant, and it's all equal to 0. So everything is over to one side. If you basically take the squared side of things, like if you have the standard form of the equation, and you would square your binomial, and then square your other binomial with the x and the y values. Okay? And then just basically put everything over on one side. Now, if we want to write this in standard form, okay, what you will need to be able to do is use completing the square. Okay, so whenever you solved quadratics, you completed the square. So the first thing I want to do is I want to group all of my x's together, I want to group all of my y's together, and I want to send my constant over to the other side. So if I have x squared plus y squared plus 4x minus 6y minus 23 equal to 0. Then what I want to do is I want to put my x values, like I said, together. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in parentheses. And I'm going to have x squared plus 4x plus, and I'm going to leave a little blank, and then I'm going to have a squared. I'm going to change colors here so we know the difference. So plus, and then y squared minus 6y plus, I'm going to leave myself a little blank, and then equals, if it's negative 23 on the left, it's going to be a positive 23 on the right. So if you don't remember completing the square, it's really simple. I'm going to take each trinomial that I have, or really the binomial with the blank in there, and I'm going to take that middle term, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 4, whatever this number is right here. I'm going to take it, I'm going to divide it by 2. So I'm going to go 4 divided by 2, and I'm going to square it. Whatever I do to the left side, I'm going to do the same thing over here to the right. So 4 divided by 2, and then square it. Do the same thing with the y value. So I'm going to take negative 6, I'm going to divide by 2, and I'm going to square it. I'm going to do the same thing to the right side and go negative 6 divided by 2 and square it. These numbers should always be positive. Why are they always positive? Because they're going to get squared. Okay? Now, what I would show my Algebra 2 kids, for those of you that had me, is that I would kind of shortcut this part right here. What's 4 divided by 2? 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this, and I'm going to go x plus 2 quantity squared. Now, where did the 2 come from? All it did was take this number right there. Okay? I don't really worry about the squared part of it because it's basically what we did is make it a perfect square. So where that 2 came from, if it's positive 4 divided by 2, that's a positive 2, so that's why it's just going to be an x plus 2. Do the same thing with the y value. So instead of it being x plus or minus, it's going to be y. Now, what is negative 6 divided by 2? Positive or negative? negative 3, so it's going to be negative 3. All I did was just take negative 6 divided by 2, and that's how we got the negative 3, and we made it into a perfect square. The plus sign comes down. Now the backside just becomes, what is everything? Well, 23 is 23. So I have 23 plus, what's 4 divided by 2? We already said that it was 2. What's 2 squared? 4. Very good. Then, negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is a positive 9. Add all of those values up. 36. Boom! It's just like the standard form. It's like how we started all this mess. It's crazy. We used a square to make a circle. Right? We completed the square. Now we have a circle. Mind blown on this beautiful Monday morning. So then from here, write the standard form. We have it, and then graph it. So where's my H and my K? What's H? What's the center of my circle? Remember, it's the opposite here and here, so it's going to be negative 2, positive 3. Then my radius, and I'm really just writing this so it's going to be easier to graph. So the radius is going to be the square root of 36, which is just 6. So then, basically take my negative 2, positive 3, plot my point. I'm going to go 6 in every direction. So here, and then draw my circle. So all we're going to do, you're just going to use completing of the square. Okay? Group your x's together, complete the square of your x's, make sure whatever you add to one side or in that blank, make sure it's over on the other side in that blank as well. Question?
Okay, why do you have to, flip it?
What do you mean, flip it?
It was 2 and negative 3. Why did you flip it to negative 3?
Because it's the opposite. What's the opposite of positive 2?
Never mind. Just
Okay. Did you? All right. So then on 7, first things first, I need to put all my x's together. So I'm going to have x squared plus 4x plus the blank plus, again, I'm just going to change colors so then we can, y squared minus 4y plus the blank, and then equal to, I'm going to take that negative 1 and send it over to the other side, and I'm going to have it as a positive 1. So then, to fill in the blanks, what do we need to do right here? What am I going to divide by 2? 4 divided by 2. Don't forget to square it. Do the same thing on, since I did it on the left side, do the same thing to the right side. So 4 divided by 2, quantity squared. Now let's take it and do the y the same way. So now instead of it being a positive 4, it's going to be a negative 4 divided by 2, quantity squared, plus negative 4 divided by 2, quantity squared. Now we're going to take these two completed squares and we're going to turn it into my circle standard form. So I'm just going to have a parenthesis and I'm going to square it. It's going to be x, and then what is 4 divided by 2? Positive 2, right? So that's where the positive 2 came from. The plus just comes with it. Okay, that just comes straight down. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it for the y values. We're going to square it. We're going to have y. And then I'm just going to take whatever that number is. So negative 4 divided by 2 is going to be a negative 2. And then on the right side, just kind of combine everything. So I have 1 plus 4 plus 4 again. So it's going to be equal to 9. So here's standard form. So basically, as far as standard form is concerned, there I am finished. Okay, there's the standard form of the circle. As far as the graphing side of it, then I need to know what the center of my circle is. Okay, so I need to know for graphing purposes, I need to know what the center is, which is h and k. And then I need to know what the radius is. So the radius is always just the square root of whatever's back there. The center is going to be the opposite of these two values. So what's the opposite of positive 2? Negative 2. What's the opposite of negative 2? Positive 2, right? So then I'll have a point at negative 2, positive 2. Okay, over here on my graph, right about there. And then the radius is just whatever, okay, that number is basically the square root of 9, which is 3. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and 3 to the right. I'm going to go 3 to the left. I'm going to go 3 up and 3 down. And then plot my points of my circle.